age 16, Sierra Leone. I fight with them plenty times. We went and destroyed towns. We burned houses. After the fighting, we arrest some peoples. The commanders told us to kill them. At that time, we killed them. My commander, that commander is very wicked. He gives you a knife to kill somebody. If you're not, also you will die. When he gave you the knife, he said, look at this person. Kill this person. If you deny, he will slaughter you also. So that's why I do so. So the name that they give me, the fighting name, is Blood Never Dry. So my name is that.
Snatched from childhood, as young as 7, children throughout Africa are being forced to fight. There are currently over 250,000 children involved in armed conflicts throughout the world. At least 7 countries in Africa are using children in combat right now.
The condition in Africa is considered the worst place for child soldiers, even though this is a worldwide problem.
In northern Uganda, for example, the Lord's Resistance Army uses several tactics to retain children in their ranks. One of the ways that they do it is by instilling so much fear into these kids that they're unwilling to leave their combat roles. I've heard of situations where children were forced to hack to death children in their own communities, their friends, their brothers, their neighbors.
In Liberia, for example, I've heard of children soldiers that used human intestines as a rope they use in blocking the road to stop vehicles and people from crossing. And some of these are just 9-year-old kids.
One particularly insidious situation that I heard was a number of children that were being forced as soldiers by the Lord's Resistance Army had to bite a child to death until that child bled to death from the human bite wounds that were inflicted.
They're supposed to be at home watching cartoons and playing with their friends and going to school. Not carrying a gun and killing other people and pulling out their intestines and eating their heart. At 7?
I don't know what I was fighting for. The rebels just told us that we were fighting for the people. I don't know what the war was all about because at the time I was not really old enough to understand these things.
Well, I think most Americans would be shocked to learn that there are 250,000 kids that are participating in armed conflict right now.
Another way of thinking about this is 75% of the world's conflict, so 3 out of every 4 wars, has children involved in this combatants.
In the past decade, an estimated 2 million kids have been killed in armed conflict, and about 6 million have been injured or permanently disabled.
They forced me to join them, and I said I will not join them, and they killed my small brother to join them by force. There, I changed up my mind and joined them.
If you imagine yourself at 7, somebody comes to your house, probably while you're still in bed. You hear noises, you hear your parents talking, you go outside. Right in your presence, both your parents are killed. You look around, nobody else. And you're told the only option you have is not come with us. As kids, you need a form of security. You need somewhere to get food. And so they are compelled to go with them.
Many of these kids are living in poor communities where they're not getting regular meals, where they have very few options, job options or school options. So sometimes these rebel commanders come into the community to recruit these children, and a child may think, well, I can get 3 square meals a day by joining this outfit, I get to carry a gun, I get to be a part of something. And sometimes they willingly go thinking that it's going to be an okay experience, but it's not until they actually join these ranks, until they're abused, until they're beaten, until they're forced to kill, that they realize what they've gotten themselves into.
One of the reasons why children are used is because they can be easily manipulated, because their brains aren't as formed as adults. They don't have a level of understanding of the risk that they're involved in.
In other cases, it may just be desperation. You're talking about a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old who's a street kid. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. An organization comes along and says, not only will we feed you, we'll house you, and we'll also put a gun in your hand so you'll be in charge. You don't have to fear anymore.
During the time I was with the drugs, I was not feeling anything bad when I'm at the front. I raped women. I killed children. And naturally, sometimes my head just blow up. Even my friend who is standing beside me, if I start going off head, I just pull my pistol and fire him sometimes. Yeah. That's why they call me Bloodshed. Whenever I am at my base, I don't feel anything bad.
They forced children to do drugs, and they ended up getting addicted to these drugs.
The drugs depend on which conflict and what's available. It's anything from things like cocaine and heroin to local mixes they call like brown. And in some situations, they'll take the drugs and pack it in with gunpowder, which they believe gives it a bigger kick.
Now, when they were addicted to these drugs, what did that mean? It mean they needed to get their fix of this drug substance every day, and the rebel commanders were providing that substance. So they were very much unwilling to leave because at that point they were addicted and they didn't want to leave.
That's what makes them commit some of these atrocities that they commit, because they're not doing most of the things they do with a clear mind.
And the idea of all of this is to cause that break in identity, for that child to think of themselves as someone new.
The rebels trained me on how to use a gun. They showed me how to dismantle a weapon and put it back together again. They showed me how to fire the gun and how to clean it. They taught me how to make sure I didn't get injured when it recoils.
Many of these machine guns, destructive machine guns that children have, those countries don't even produce them. They're produced by many of the so-called civilized countries where close to 500,000 people are killed by small weapons. And they're calling the small weapons the mines, the grenades, the AK-47s, M10s. They're calling them the weapons of mass destruction of the third world.
One of the reasons why children use assault rifles is because it's a weapon that they can handle effectively. We've seen children using assault rifles from ages 10 to 17.
They're going to abduct anybody who can carry a rifle, whether it's a child, whether it's a man, woman, young girl, young boy. If you can carry a gun, you're going to be a combatant.
I was attending primary school. The rebels came and attacked us. They killed my mother and father in front of my eyes. I was 10 years old. They took me with them. They trained us to fight. The first time I killed someone, I got sick. I thought I was going to die.
Traditionally, there's been a taboo against girls being engaged. This is broken by many of the armed groups in Africa.
Many of the girls that are abducted are forced not only to be frontline combatants, but also oftentimes become sex slaves to their commanders. And there's a whole range of other issues that come along with that. Sexually transmitted diseases such as HIV/AIDS, unwanted pregnancies.
They also find it tougher to reintegrate back into society after the war ends, because in some cases the local community thinks that somehow their honor has been sullied.
They told us to shoot. I was well afraid because this is my first time to do that kind of act. Sometimes for a day, I kill more than 5, so I can't remember how many people I killed.
A bullet from a 14-year-old can kill you just like a bullet from a 40-year-old. It doesn't distinguish.
In many parts of Africa, the societies had ways of sheltering, protecting women and children and the infirm from combat. But this is violated now.
When you speak to a soldier about the experience of fighting children, they describe it as probably the toughest dilemma of their career, because no professional soldier wants to fight children.
They couldn't find enough adults, for instance, in the Sudan, in many other parts. When they couldn't find adults, it's easy to use children.
There have been child soldiers throughout history, but they've been used in very, very small numbers, literally in the hundreds, and they never were in a situation where there were so many child soldiers that the group fighting was dependent on them. You shouldn't have war and children. You shouldn't have them in the same discussion. And yet somehow in this century we've let that moral breakdown.
I feel so bad about the things that I did. It disturbs me so much that I inflicted death on other people. When I go home, I must do some traditional rites because I have killed. I must perform these rites and cleanse myself. I still dream about the boy from my village that I killed. I see him in my dreams, and he is talking to me, saying I killed him for nothing. And I am crying.
There has to be an effort made to rehabilitate them and integrate them, because they are as much as victims as victimizers.
Unfortunately, in places like northern Uganda and in countries around the world, many of these kids can't go back to their families or their home communities because of the atrocities that they were forced to commit. They would not be welcomed back. There are multiple steps to the process when you're dealing with a child soldier. You got to remember these kids are dealing with extreme psychological and physical traumas. So meeting their initial needs, their health needs, many of these kids have wounds that are deep. Many of these kids are permanently disabled. So treating their physical problems is obviously going to be a priority.
Psychosocial rehabilitation. That is, and often these situations, these kids need someone to talk to, someone to go through what's happened so that they can get past it.
That can take more than a year just to get it to a place where that child is willing to accept ongoing therapy. Now, the issue is that once you get a child rehabilitated, you want to try to get them back into normal life, reintegrate them, if you would, back into society. So another thing that we do is provide that child with job training, provide them with skills so that they can go back and hopefully mainstream into a normal way of life.
And just like any other victim of abuse, they may be scarred by that experience, but it doesn't mean that they're somehow lost forever.
Children are resilient, and they can make it through these things. They can strive. They can have productive lives. It doesn't mean it's the end of their life. They can still do great things.
The key is whether they get that help and support, and that really puts the burden back on us to face it and deal with it and help them out. I think sometimes when people first learn about the issue of child soldiers, they want to recoil on horror and also go, this is just so big, it's so messy, it's so ugly, I don't know what I can do about it.
The best thing anybody can do, any government or any individual can do for these children is not being silent. Do not pretend that you've not heard about them. Do not pretend that you've not read about them. Do not pretend that you haven't seen them. They are there and they need your help.
There are things that can be done. Probably the best of our best is in northern Uganda, where we operate a child soldier rehabilitation center. More than 15,000 kids have been through this program successfully and have gone back to their home communities.
So really, to us as individuals, it goes back to, again, are you out there helping the groups that are engaging on this problem? And if you want to do something, then you should be reaching out to these groups and trying to aid them, because that's where it's going to have maximum impact. That's where it's going to help child soldiers go back to being children.
Dedicated people are working hard around the world to eliminate, but more importantly prevent, the use of child soldiers. You can find more information and opportunities to help at unicef.org and child-soldiers.org. Thank you.